YouTube as not being a video platform, which I think many people think it is. It's a click and watch platform. But I don't know any company that started a YouTube channel 7 or 8 years ago that really regrets it now.
Two best times to invest in a channel are when it's new and when it's boring.
Welcome to The Growth Dojo, the podcast for marketers who think differently. Hosted by me, Luke Osley-White from Dojo AI. This show is your training ground for unconventional marketing tactics, honest agency conversations, and the real career journeys of top CMOs.
Together they founded Humble and Brag, although I'm still not sure which one's Brag, a full-stack YouTube agency based in Berlin, built specifically for startups and challenger brands who want YouTube to actually work for them. Ed Wood spent years inside some of Berlin's most exciting startups, scaling content teams, running campaigns, and eventually serving as CMO at Career Foundry, where he turned YouTube into a major customer acquisition channel. Callum Russell, meanwhile, was quietly building some of the most watched brand channels in the Berlin startup scene, growing AJ and Smart and Career Foundry to hundreds of thousands of subscribers and millions of views. A few years ago, they did what recovering CMOs dream of. They stopped working inside the machine and started building a better one. Together, they cover everything: strategy, scripting, production, distribution, ads, the whole thing. No glossy reels, no vanity metrics, just YouTube as a genuine growth channel. Ed, Callum, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you here with me and Dwight.
Thank you very much for having us.
Excited to be here, yeah, thank you.
So we met a few years ago, just actually, I think maybe the week or something after you guys launched the company. So really excited to meet you guys a few years on. For a lot of companies, YouTube is a really difficult channel. You call yourselves recovering CMOs, which I love, who now run a YouTube agency specifically for startups and challenger brands. A lot of people think of YouTube as really expensive, slow to show results, and most B2B companies just genuinely ignore it. So why did you bet your entire business on it?
Primarily for two reasons. The first one is it was the channel that we had both fallen in love with over the past kind of 5 to 10 years, maybe the past decade really. And just saw not only how it was a great standalone channel that could be built up as an acquisition channel, as you mentioned at both Babbel and Career Foundry, it ended up driving a similar percentage of revenue, which was in double digit, about 15%, somewhere around that. But it also really helped support the entire marketing machine by being the content engine for all the other channels as well. And I think we can go into that a little bit later, how it has all these the word synergies with all these other channels. And yeah, those two things, the fact that we love the channel and the fact that it had been successful at the previous companies. And then we just saw how that wasn't the case. It'd always been a competitive advantage for us at the other companies. And that was because the other competitors obviously weren't investing in it and seeing success in it. So the hypothesis was, if we can make it work for the companies, for our previous employers, then hopefully we can make it work for future clients and convince them of the value of it. And to be honest, making that transition from working in-house at a company to going to the agency side, we obviously had a lot of contacts also from competitors that were very keen to simply replicate what we've been doing. So those were our first leads, essentially, as we opened the agency. And then we met lovely people like yourself as well, who we like to term multipliers, because everyone who could just put us in contact with people. And that was just the kind of great way to transition. And to be honest, you'll know yourself, a lot of people are interested, but don't know how to take those first steps. So that's how we got started. And that's how we just very simply tested the demand and validated the idea. But I think we weren't very risk averse going into it. Let's give this a go. Worst that can happen is it fails. And then we'll have to go and work for another company.
Makes sense.
We believe that marketing is done better when it's done in an integrated way. Then you have like full visibility of how one thing affects the other. But obviously we know that there are certain channels that are really untapped opportunities almost for most companies anyway. YouTube being one of them for sure. But I'd be interested to hear your view on what did you see in the market that made you put your eggs on YouTube? What do you see as YouTube's role in digital marketing going forward?
I mean, in terms of the opportunity, like I said, I just didn't see many companies really exploiting it to its full potential. And then when you look at the actual agency market, it seemed pretty saturated to us when it comes to most of the other standardized channels, whether that's SEO, whether that's Meta, for example, whether it's the kind of startup agencies around optimizing for AI search, all those kinds of things as well. So that was the opportunity. Then obviously our expertise on top of that. Then we saw, and then to the second part of your question, with regard to the opportunity, then there's a definite parallel to SEO in terms of the resilience of the channel that you can build up. So if you invest for, say, a year and you're consistently producing video, then you end up with that channel that even if you take a break from publishing, is going to continue driving results for a year, maybe 2 years, 3 years into the future. There are still videos that we made a decade ago that are driving views and therefore have business value. And I think that's, for me, as with the CMO hat on, that's where the real value lies, because I always had this slight fear of, okay, what happens if there's a bit of a downturn, if we can't spend so much budget on paid marketing, all those kinds of things, or the simple fact that it's getting more expensive and more competitive. Like, what happens if we have to turn off all those channels? Does that just mean everything dries up? And I would always lean on SEO and YouTube primarily as a way of mitigating that. And I always figured it's the smart way to build a resilient business. And yeah, I think at both Babel and Career Foundry, it was really a case, and I know for AJ and Smart as well, that built resilient businesses, those two things. Now, I think it's a bit more complicated because arguably SEO is the barrier to entry is super low. On the other hand, the fact that people seem to think it's very boring and now outdated seems to present a huge opportunity. I think the two best times to invest in a channel are when it's new and when it's boring. And yeah, with a lot of clients, we're also doing that on the side, repurposing YouTube scripts to create articles to target the low competition keywords super successfully as well. So yeah, long answer to your question, but for me, it's really that resilience component.
The idea of this kind of being an evergreen channel that you can come back to and it's always building value is something that I'm always surprised that B2B companies don't recognize as well as the B2C companies. You see all of these examples of B2C companies that have built effective TikTok models, YouTube models for their businesses. And a lot of B2B companies that I speak to say, oh, our audience isn't there, which I think number one streaming platform in the world is hilarious as a sentence in the first place. But it's normally followed by, we can't afford to do this properly. So it's also the same thing for us. We haven't really launched an aggressive YouTube channel strategy yet because it's expensive financially, but also in terms of time. What do you think when you speak to companies? What do you see as the main thing that's really stopping them? Is it a mindset thing? Is it a budget thing? Or is it something else?
I think it's a little bit of everything wrapped up that you've mentioned there. I think most companies sense this kind of mysticism around YouTube. And I think there's a perception that there's a high barrier to entry. But like you mentioned with these different other platforms like LinkedIn and such, I think YouTube is such an evergreen platform that we have this kind of trope that we mentioned in our own videos, that it's like a 24-hour sales team that works for you when you're offline or if there's a bit of a dip. But with companies, I think it's everything. There's a lot of moving parts to YouTube. There's video production, scripting. I think if you want to do it well, you need to get a handle on the platform and understand how it works. And I think to do that, you need to spend time or be a fan of the platform. So yeah, sorry. You need to spend time on the platform or be a fan of it. And I just don't think many founders that we've encountered have that kind of level of expertise with the platform generally. I think people might know it's a good idea, but yeah, there's a perception of a high barrier to entry. And I've been fortunate enough in my own career that I worked for two companies that's had that buy-in already. So one with Ed at Career Foundry, and then previously at AJ and Smart, Jonathan Courtney, the CEO there, was a huge YouTube fan and saw that as a really high value platform to be on, and then just went all in on it. And my sole job when I was at AJ and Smart was just building out weekly content to build out this audience for AJ and Smart. Yeah, I don't know if is that too rambling an answer, Luke?
And
No, I think that's fine.
when is it too early? Is there such a thing as too early to be on YouTube?
Too early, sorry, or
Too early, yeah. Or too small a company, too young a startup.
I wouldn't say so. I don't think there's a time to be too early. I think it's a little bit like investing in the stock market. They say the best time to have started was probably 5-10 years ago, and the second best time is now. And I think with these videos, we view them as compounding assets. And if you're starting from scratch, you're likely not going to get it right every release. But the more you publish and the better you get at it, the more data you accrue, and then the better results will be for the longer term. Yeah, Ed, do you have anything?
Yeah, we chatted about it a little bit yesterday as well. And I think getting started sooner and getting into the process of delivering videos, that can be done at any time. The one thing that I think of when someone mentions readiness is, can you commit to doing it consistently? And for us, for example, when we were just starting out, we really wanted to get started with a YouTube channel from day one. But obviously there's a lot of stuff going on when you first start an agency and you're heavy into client acquisition, all those kinds of things, sorting out the bureaucracy. And so we didn't manage that consistency. And it's only recently that we've got to that point. So I think it's when you can get ideally senior members of your team to free up time, for example, once a month, maybe once every 2 months, to do batch productions, and to be able to commit to doing that consistently, then you're in a good place. So it comes down to the same as everything, prioritization ultimately. But I do see that maybe in the first 6 months, year, 2 years, maybe around investment rounds, all those kinds of things, it might be difficult to dedicate the time to it. But to get into the process of doing it, like any channel, whether it's LinkedIn or whatever, just doing it consistently is the key, so you can iterate.
I think getting that consistency is related to the point you had before, right, about the buy-in. Like, people need to be convinced that it's worth doing in order that they get the buy-in, in order that they do the consistency, in order that they're coming back. I think one of the things that's also why we wanted to do this podcast, in terms of the channels that marketers forgot, is that we want to be able to provide some of those insights on which channels people should be doing that they maybe haven't tried. And that's obviously one of the things we want to do here with YouTube. I think one of the best ways that we've seen for that is just to go through a few examples of companies that are actually winning on YouTube, maybe 2 to 3 examples. Some of them, maybe some of those longer term successful channels that you've seen, and also some maybe recent viral successes and what they're doing differently as examples, and maybe inspiration for companies who would be interested in starting YouTube but just need that little push.
Yeah, from my side, I think we were talking about this yesterday, but in terms of B2B companies that have been doing it well for some time, I would look at every marketer's favorite companies like SEMrush and Ahrefs and such. I think they do a fantastic job of building, and they've been building their channels for the long term now, like I think the last 5-6 years plus. But they also then position their product as the solution. So they have this kind of broad channel with a lot of broad video topics around SEO optimization and audience building, but they do it while they position their product as the kind of natural next step for someone that's interested in that. And I think that works really well. So they've got 2 very established channels that are both like now authorities on the kind of the SEO side of YouTube. And then in terms of more viral successes, again, this is something that Ed and I discussed, but our peers and friends here in Berlin, 9X, they're an AI and automation company, but they've blown up on YouTube recently. I think Ed maybe can offer more detail here, but like they've gone from 6,000 to I think 55,000 subscribers in the space of 6 months, working with a YouTube strategist, and that's very much founder led. So one of the co-founders, Jan, is responsible pretty much for putting out all this YouTube content, and they've had some massive success. And then they're offering a free training course, but then also they position their tutorials cleverly. So they'll do a video explaining a key concept around AI automation, but they'll then link the lead magnet, which is the full tutorial that then people can sign up for in order to complete the tutorial with them on the video, which is really clever. And again, you're positioning your kind of lead magnet or your product as the next logical solution. So yeah, I would definitely check out the 9X channel. They've been doing some really cool stuff, particularly recently, but they've had videos in the 6-figure audience stats, or figures now, yeah. So I'll do that again. But they've had certain videos around AI that have had, 6-figure viewership stats in the last few weeks as well.
On that, do you
Ed,
still
do you want
see?
to add
Sorry, go ahead.
Right,
Ed.
no.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
there's not really anything to add. I think that's just, I think for anyone watching this, then they're a fantastic case study of how to do YouTube well, because they're growing very quickly, even compared to any competitors in that domain. Not only that, one thing that often gets ignored is how to build the funnel off the back of YouTube, which is basically what we'd call an organic funnel. So having those low friction, high volume conversion points or lead magnets. And most companies that we start working with as well are just missing that. So they try and take people straight to a sales call or straight to a product purchase, which is obviously a huge lift from having watched a video. And so you need a way of immediately providing value to people. And that's what they do extremely well. So I've never seen the kind of conversion rates that they get off the back of the video views. So just go and check out that and click around. It's highly worth it. And especially if you're in the kind of informational vertical, then, or edtech essentially, then there's a lot of things that you could emulate there for sure.
and I think they're also a really good example of like really honing down on a winning format. So they've been doing these extreme use case videos, and then now every time there's a new piece of AI software that gets rolled out or a new kind of automation that they're excited about, they'll inject that tool into this insane use case format that they've been doing. And I think near enough every time it blows up. So they have videos that have 400,000 or 500,000 views now in this kind of same format.
It's amazing. And what do you see that's really poor use of YouTube? I'd love to pick your brain on that. What shouldn't we be doing?
Oh, what shouldn't you be doing? The really kind of cliche answer is that someone comes to us and says, yeah, we've been doing YouTube or we've dabbled in it. And you look at their channel and they have a few ads that they've uploaded and some old webinars, and that's about it. And nothing with the YouTube, that intersection between the YouTube audience and their target audience, their product audience, basically their target market. And you obviously want to find the intersection between those two things. And basically they've just uploaded stuff that they created for their target market without the YouTube audience or the kind of formats that are popular on YouTube without any of that in mind. So those are the typical things that we see. And then obviously rectifying that is basically doing what I just said, matching those two aspects. What are people are watching in that domain, and what are the pain points, the problems, the objections, all those things of your actual target market, and where's that overlap? And that's where the magic happens.
I really liked for the kind of process that you talked about where YouTube is a multi-funnel step channel, right? I think this is one of the elements I see people forget about a lot. They always think about it as, okay, it's a flashy awareness channel. We try and get as many people to watch the videos as possible, and then magically they will buy our product. You mentioned you guys do a sort of strategy and positioning workshop at the beginning of any project that you do with clients to help them figure out both what content to make, but also then mapping it to this kind of framework that you work with. How do you help a company that has no idea where to start? What does this kind of framework look like for a company to create a channel? If you can go through it with us.
Sure. So basically, I brought this along because this is the Bible. So April Dunford's obviously awesome book, which is basically operationalizing positioning. And we basically go through a kind of rapid positioning process. So starting with 3 horizons, where does the company want to be in 6 months, a couple of years, 5 years, to understand that. Even from that, then we can start to glean whether this company really has the kind of DNA to go in on organic, because maybe they want to do an exit in 2 years' time or something like that might already slightly disqualify from really meaningfully growing out a YouTube channel. So understanding that, and then basically diving into all the standard positioning exercises, understanding the competitors, understanding the ideal customer. And then ultimately, as we move down the funnel of positioning, so to speak, obviously understanding what the key pain points are of that ideal customer, and then the kind of video content that we can create in order to address those pain points, basically help them solve, their real business problems in order to ideally become a channel that they want to follow. And even I think you can probably think of these things from your own domain. There are some resources and some YouTube channels that you need to follow. And I think we were talking about 9X a moment ago. What 9X do really well, as mentioned, is obviously every time there's a new product released or a new version or a new tool or whatever it might be from OpenAI or from Anthropic, they're very quick to release a video on it. And so if you want to understand the capabilities of Claude Code or something like that, then you follow them because you know that within a few days of the tool being released, they're going to teach you as a layperson how you can make the most of that tool. And so if you can become one of those channels that people need to follow in your industry, then you're obviously very strongly positioned. And then it's like bringing in all the other sources. So you might have a blog that performs very well. What are the top 5 blog posts? Can those be translated into videos? If that's done, then you can obviously take that video, use it within the blog post. And like I said, mentioned earlier on, you have those kind of synergies. So you pull that in, and then you also look at the creators who are often quicker to create within your domain. You know, they tend to spring up quite organically. You see what they're producing that's popular, and then you give that video or that topic your own personal angle. And you basically pull those different inspirations in order to come up with a strategy. And then it's a case of obviously just testing, seeing what works. And a bit like 9X again, you eventually, if you're lucky, you land on a few formats that are really successful. And then it's a case of doing that over and over again, and then layering new formats, new videos, new topics on top of that until another thing works. And that way you build out your strategy.
To use another example, we talked the other day about the Nothing phone company as well, just to give the other side, on the B2C side as well. We can also use some other examples if you like. How do you prioritize what type of videos to create? Like when you have this, you mentioned like 10 different sources you could get inspiration for the videos you want to create. How do you prioritize which ones to do? How much of those choices are strategic planning from the beginning? How much of them are experiments on a weekly basis?
I can just take this for the first 2 minutes and then I'd hand over to Callum. I think if we take the default case, then I'd say it's normally in our interests as an agency and certainly for the client as well to start building out the top of the funnel. So to start building out the number of subscribers, the number of views. But as ever, it really depends on the goal of the client. So some CEOs, for example, who are greenlighting the project. They want to see revenue quickly off the back of whatever's happening on YouTube. So if that's the case, you'd go lower funnel, and you'd want to make sure that you have a video explainer that always pops up for brand searches, which probably isn't there. So it has definite business value, but is a bit of an easy way into to drive revenue, or at least attributed revenue from the beginning. So it depends on the goal of the company. Assuming the default that they want to grow out a meaningful marketing channel, then I'd hand over to Callum and he can talk through a bit more the full funnel approach, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe just to touch on my early experiences working at AJ and Smart. Like, I was commissioned to produce video content and grow an audience, and it was a fairly broad objective. So I just started making videos that I thought would get views. So I looked at what other creators were doing on the platform, and this is going back like 8 years now. And then seeing how I could apply those kind of video titles and topics to the framework and the product that AJ and Smart operated, which was kind of loosely UX design, but also focusing on design sprint and design sprint methodology, and then just kind of cross-pollinating those two, which I guess now you would call kind of like niche bending or niching down on certain topics. But this was all before that. I was aware of that kind of terminology. But yeah, and then I just started publishing content week in, week out, and you start to learn from the data and the back end of YouTube what's working and what's resonating with your audience. And I have a slightly different approach because I'm not necessarily a trained marketer by trade. But in terms of the video creative, you learn very quickly what your audience likes and what they don't like through engagement.
The challenge for people is basically having that balance of, okay, this is where we want to take the channel versus this is what is working. So I think making those two pieces combined together, I think, is one of the things that we see as being one of the big challenges, the tactical versus the strategic. We wanted to go through a few of the tactical topics in the session today as well, because we want to make sure that obviously people are inspired by some of the stories from some of the companies that we've discussed, but we also want to make sure that they have some things that they could apply straight away. One of the things that we talked about the other day in terms of testing is around thumbnails, which is maybe something that people have spent about 10 seconds thinking about in their life for a lot of these companies. But they're one of the bigger leverage points that we talked about the other day that are often screwed up by companies especially. Can you give us a quick classroom session on, or a quick framework on what makes great thumbnails, what kills click-through rates, what should people be doing?
This is one of my favorite areas to talk about. I could talk about this for hours. Yeah, I think to coin the YouTube strategist Paddy Galloway, but he describes YouTube as not being a video platform, which I think many people think it is. It's a click and watch platform. And in order to get the click and get someone to engage with your content, you need to create some kind of enticing packaging that will do that. So I think thumbnails are often overlooked and kind of scoffed at a little bit as a almost sort of social media trope, I guess, that any kind of graphic designer with a Canva subscription can do. But they're vitally important on YouTube. So I think here we mentioned having some elements that we could break down tactically. And if you look at the 9X channel, interestingly enough, we actually ran a thumbnail production session with them where they came into our studio and we just captured a whole bank of really nice imagery for them. And I think that would be my first tactical tip, is just get your team together or anyone that's going to be involved with YouTube or appearing in videos and get some nice contrasted images of them on a basic background that can be cut out and then applied to the actual thumbnail image itself. And you can do that in 20 minutes if you do it in a kind of block session. And then you want to focus on creating a sense of intrigue for the viewer on the platform. I think people give like less than a second's worth of attention when they're on the browse page or the home page of YouTube. So you want to create something that is eye-catching, and we're not going for award-winning design here. It just has to kind of catch the eye and entice, and then the next step would be viewing the title from that. So things like big blocky text, simple phrases, and something that creates a bit of a curiosity gap or curiosity hook for the viewer that they can then look at the title, and then there's further exposition there. So the thumbnail and title really do have this kind of correlation where you want to play one off against the other. And yeah, I think that would, Ed, was there other points we wanted to talk there about in terms of tactical?
No, I think
No,
that's probably already enough for anyone getting started, but just underlining the importance of the packaging. Basically, again, if you listen to any creator, they go on and on about the packaging, that as long as the video delivers on its promise, then it's the packaging that you should be spending your time on. And you should have that locked down before you make your video. So title, thumbnail ideas, the idea for the hook, all things that you should have locked down before you record, for sure.
in a perfect world, I don't think I know anyone that actually does that. But, ideally, they would.
Just Mr. Beast is the only person in the world that does it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Callum, you mentioned some
And maybe-
videos. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe to touch on that, YouTube has pretty YouTube has pretty extensive A/B testing available on the platform. So a little bit like Instagram with the trial reels, you can now ABC test thumbnails and titles and any combination of those as well. And that's something that we do with our clients. So we really try and optimize. YouTube measures it on percentage of watch time across the test variants, but we do really try and offer that to our clients where we test and retest and double down on winning formulas when it comes to thumbnail testing, which I don't think many platforms really afford you, but YouTube is pretty extensive and deep in that respect.
Quite a new
You mentioned
introduction as
something.
well, I think so.
I was just going to ask. I mean, there was something Callum mentioned that was quite interesting to me, which is the kind of viewing YouTube as less of a video platform and more of a click and watch. Was it click and watch that you phrased it?
Yeah.
Which leads me to the question: who is YouTube competing against? Like, I could see, and then TikTok came to disrupt YouTube, and now I don't know. Is YouTube a social media platform? Is it actually competing? Because TikTok isn't click and watch. TikTok is infinite scroll, so it's actually competing against other social media platforms. YouTube, I would see as competing more against Disney Plus and Netflix in that sense, but it's also a little bit different. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. When you mentioned it's competing with Disney Plus, if you remove in terms of the like the growth side of things, if you remove the natural association with something like paid performance from an organic perspective, I think YouTube is pretty unrivaled, and it's such a mature platform. I know TikTok's very well established and has this really kind of core demographic lockdown, but YouTube's been on the go since like 2006, and it's a very mature platform with something like, they always tout this number, 1.2 billion monthly active users or something. Maybe it's even higher. So yeah, I think you're right. I think YouTube, unlike TikTok and Instagram and perhaps LinkedIn, is across multiple devices. And there's people now that sit and watch 2 hour long documentaries or these kind of camping videos in their home on their TV with the TV app. Yeah, me too. I just spent like 40 minutes watching a guy build a shed in the forest with his dog, which is why am I doing this? But yeah, I think it's a very mature platform, and I think it is competing not only with other social media platforms, but with streaming platforms. And you just have to look at what the BBC are doing now with the platform, where they have, I think, 10 separate channels, and they now have this collaboration with YouTube itself to get more news content out there, and traditional news outlets now publishing weekly reports and daily reports on YouTube. So I really think there is a shift, and I think it's going to be playing the long game and the quiet game, but it's just there constantly. It's on every device now, desktop, mobile, TV, and I struggle to imagine a day where I'm not on YouTube myself. So yeah.
So in a sense, it also democratizes access to video advertising, because you have to be a very, and I guess that's your whole positioning. So I get it now. But it's, if you're a very big advertiser, you can afford putting your kind of $1 million ad on television and on linear and on Disney Plus or whatever streaming platform now actually has ads in it. But if you're a startup, you could actually get on YouTube. I guess my fear is that with YouTube, where is the next stage of audience segmentation? What are you seeing currently? Because in my mind, it's still something that's primarily used by younger generations in terms of replacing TV, right? And actually maybe streaming YouTube directly on their living room instead of watching a quick video online that's been embedded somewhere. So in that sense, what kind of shift are you seeing, a generational shift happening?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of the stats that I've seen recently, then YouTube is pretty unique in terms of how ubiquitous it is. As mentioned, with Shorts, then they're competing obviously directly against TikTok and Instagram, and already clocking up huge watch times and a huge user base, because obviously they've transferred all the Google users and YouTube users over to that as well. And you also see, for example, interestingly, Shorts being promoted from homepages on desktop laptops as well. So you see like consumption not only happening on mobile, but also happening across other devices. And then just to support what Callum was saying as well, it's responsible for the highest number of streaming hours in the US and pretty much worldwide of any platform. So more than Netflix already. So people are watching YouTube more than any other streaming platform. And like you said, that means that you can then advertise on television, and absolutely you can do that as a startup. And we've done it with 5 euros a day. So yeah, it means that you can access any device basically. And I'd have to check the source of this, but I'm pretty sure it's top 3 apps used for every single age demographic. And yeah, across devices as well. So you basically, your audience is undoubtedly there. And then you have, say you want to invest in YouTube ads, then obviously you have all the demographics targeting, all the interest targeting, remarketing opportunities, all those things that are within Google Ads, which is as advanced as any ad platform. So it has a lot to boast about for sure at the moment. I think it's real. Two things feels to me, even though it's, as I said, a very mature platform, that it's a bit of a kind of gold rush at the moment because people are seeing these opportunities. We're also seeing big improvements in their performance marketing products as well. And the second thing is, I think for creators, it's becoming potentially a little bit tougher because you see the established broadcasters migrating to YouTube as well. So now you're competing against BBC with their 10 channels and quite a production team behind it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, but also challenges as well. And it's pushing in the direction of all the other things that everyone's talking about in marketing at the moment, of niching down, of really specializing in specific channels, whatever it might be. So it's definitely maturing as a platform, and there's more competition there, but it's still a lot of opportunity, especially with kind of new audiences developing in your domain. For example, when it comes to AI, then there's obviously, as we saw with the 9X example, just tons of opportunity there.
Come in quickly, I know this is a bit of a segue, but in terms of like the broadcast media and these established broadcasters being on YouTube now, I think interestingly, a story that just broke in the last day or two is what happened with Stephen Colbert over in the States, where he was going to have a political guest on, but the FCC in America deemed that it was overbalanced in a certain political leaning and didn't want them to broadcast the show. So he just published it on his YouTube channel and it got 6 million views in the space of a day. So I see that you have these kind of traditional broadcasters now that are also migrating to YouTube because of the reach and the attention that are on the platform. And it is a bit more of a globalized audience that you don't need to pay to be on network TV with whatever studio. You can just be a celebrity, for example, or build an audience and publish your own content on your own terms, which is really interesting to see.
We see a lot, as you were talking about some of these bigger advertisers and bigger brands. For a lot of them, their first step into any platform is advertising on the platform, and then they start building an organic audience afterwards. We've talked a lot about the organic side, but I think one of the parts that's interesting for our audience is also to think about the advertising piece. And most people probably, especially Duarte demonstrating his YouTube usage, think about YouTube ads as being pre-roll video ads and things like this. But there are tons of different placements that you can use now, also ones that you can use for promoting organic content as well. What would you say first-time YouTube advertisers should actually focus on? What should be the first things that they try out?
Again, it really depends on the size of the company. For us, for smaller companies, I do find that there are interesting kind of nooks and crannies that you can explore that are very low cost and high reach. So one of the ones that I've talked about a fair bit in some of our videos, for example, is the in-feed placement. So getting onto the YouTube homepage. If you imagine you have your 1.2 billion people, you have 90% of Germany in our case, or the UK, using YouTube at least once a week. And when they open YouTube, they open it much like Netflix onto the homepage. And the majority of watches come from recommendations rather than searches, as it may have been 4 or 5 years ago. And you can get that top left position when someone opens the homepage for your content. And if you have a piece that has some organic appeal that is a bit clickable, then you can get views on that for very low cost. So we're talking like 2 cents, 2 pence. And then the watch times off the back of that in the experiments that we've run have been 2 minutes or so. So if you compare that to Meta, how much you'd pay for the watch, how much watch time you'd actually get out of it, and I think most importantly, very linked to the watch time, the state of mind that's in. They're not in this kind of frantic scrolling state of mind. They're ready to pay attention for maybe 10 minutes. So you got real quality time, which is obviously, it's hard to measure the impact of that maybe directly, but just intuitively at least, you're spending 2 minutes with someone that's actually your ICP. So something like that is super interesting. Also, there are other formats that you can, other ad formats that you can target those kinds of positions. So you have a recently released format to help grow channels where you can also have the subscribe CTA, for example. And then aside from that, if you're at the upper end, we've also run pretty high budget brand and performance campaigns for larger companies here, and just seen a big improvement fairly recently in the quality of the demand gen campaigns. So basically performance campaigns where the eventual kind of CPAs and stuff were basically competing with Meta, which I think is a bit the kind of gold standard when it comes to performance. And I think then if you integrate basically the whole of your kind of Google ads and, the whole of your marketing, and you're using YouTube also for remarketing, and also creating audiences that you can remarket to through search, whatever it might be, then it can be super, super powerful. So yeah, in summary, I think if you're a very small startup or like us, an agency, like I said, we were paying €5 a day and friends were sending me pictures of my own face and saying, hey, we just saw you on YouTube, which for me is always a great benchmark. You're getting into shorts, you're doing the demand gen campaigns, unskippable, skippable, and then you're just testing what works. But I think if you have someone that's experienced running the campaigns, it's very likely that you're going to be able to find a couple of campaign types and a couple of audiences that work for you.
Into some of those formats, one of the feedback I always used to get consistently around YouTube is, I can't measure it, so I can't afford to spend this budget. I'm basically just assuming it. You actually mentioned a few examples earlier around like how you can actually directly measure the revenue that's coming from that viewership. Can you go into a little bit around how that works and hopefully bust some of those myths for our users around the measurement topic?
Yeah,
Sure. So maybe
sorry, go on.
sorry. Sure. So maybe I can talk about the creative example first, and then Ed could come in for the actual metric side. But one example that really springs to mind there was the video that we did at Career Foundry. And we wanted to basically showcase one of our lead magnets, which was a free UX design, at the time, email course. And then we had a dashboard built out for it as well. So we just made a video entitled something like the best free UX design short course or something, or the best free UX design course. And then the intent was that you'd pick up not only subscriber traffic, but search traffic for people looking to learn about UX design. And the video format was super simple. It was a successful graduate that had come through the Career Foundry funnel and taken the paid course and was now working as a professional. And we got her to star in the video and just walk through the lead magnet. So walk through the 5-day lesson plan. So to walk through the 5-day lesson plan. And then at the end, you realize, okay, these are the learning outcomes of this short course, and this is what I learn. And oh, there's a discount code at the end of the course, and you link the short course via UTM link above the fold in the YouTube description. And that's an example for us, I think, where it kind of highlights that you don't need to get millions of views or kind of any kind of virality as a business to win. I think you just need to position your product and your lead magnet in the right way, and then get the video in front of the right people. And then maybe Ed can talk about the metrics and conversion rates of that video. But for us, that was just a really good example of what a business could do if they just wanted to get their product out in front of people quickly and easily.
Yeah, just to mention it, basically, the first obvious thing is following the creator example. If you watch any creator's video, they'll say, a third of the way through the video, 2/3 of the way through the video, they'll do a little CTA calling out whatever free lead magnet they have. And that'll be linked from the description. Maybe they've got a couple of different lead magnets linked from the description, ideally so it's visible on the desktop, for example, then above the fold, as mentioned. Then you probably collect about 50% of the traffic that's coming directly through YouTube. But obviously it's not really a golden path. So as people are going to open tabs, do the brand search, they're going to just come back to it a few days later, having remembered your brand, whatever it might be. So then the most important thing is just to have the self-reported attribution as well. So whether they're booking a sales call or signing up for whatever lead magnet, to ask how they heard about you. And then that will probably be the other 50%. If I think about Career Foundry, it's about 7% attributed, about 15% in total when it came to adding self-attributed on top. And anyway, if you don't have the self-attributed stuff or self-reported stuff already implemented, then you're obviously missing out on a huge amount of insight as to where the actual user thinks that they heard about, what was the salient channel, basically. So that's super important. And I think for any organic channel or any social media activity, it's really important to have that in place so you can properly get a good overview of where people are coming from and how they hear about you and what's important to them.
So I think that's one of the things that's going to be on our shopping list for when we do the YouTube part. But I thought I couldn't miss the opportunity of having you here and not obviously get a free lesson. So feel free to turn this around on me too. Dojo is in that position where we're publishing a lot of written content. So I'm publishing 2 to 5 written guides a week. We're running a lot of content on LinkedIn as well. We're obviously creating this podcast, but we haven't committed to a long form YouTube channel yet. What's your advice for a company like ours that we know we should be doing it, but we keep hesitating? Where should we start?
You want to take this or should I take this?
You start. I'll come in.
What we were talking about earlier. So the first thing is just to talk about who the ideal customer is, understand what their pain points are, and understand what's working for you when you've done these podcasts. As you said, you're doing a lot of written content. Is there something that's getting a particular amount of traction? Maybe that's really because people talk about the topic to you in one-to-one conversations. Maybe it's because it gets a lot of visits. Maybe it's because it's a high converting piece. And then just start sketching out those first kind of 4 to 8 videos that you think you have a good feeling about. And then looking for those kinds of topics in your sphere, see if creators that have made videos on those kinds of topics, see what the packaging is like, see what the kind of traction is there, go into the comments, see if people are saying, this is great, but what about this thing? Or I'd love to learn about that. And basically just pull it all together, like just get a real sense of what people want on YouTube. And then start sketching out, as I mentioned, the kind of packaging, what the title could be. Is that something that you would watch? Is it appealing to you? Write that hook. Does this sound like something that's really going to hook and engage people? And then when you're quite convinced, then you have everything you need for the concept at least. And then you have to cross this barrier of, okay, how are we going to turn this into an actual video? You got to get a freelancer, an agency, as someone in-house. Can you just do it in a kind of scrappy way for the first video to get into the flow of it? And I think with YouTube, it sounds a bit silly, but I always just think and enjoy it as well. Like this kind of creative production thing where you're really like you're just showing, you're turning kind of the company inside out a little bit and showing off the expertise. Get a few people involved. I always go back to AJ and Smart's a great example where their channel was full of charismatic people doing funny things and teaching. For Babbel, we had polyglots that could speak kind of 20 languages, showing off how to learn languages. For Career Foundry, we had web developers, UX designers talking about how to get into the field. So yeah, who are the seniors, who are the kind of charismatic people, who are the people with expertise within the company that you can hand this over to and be like, okay, we've got this topic, we've got this packaging, got this title. We'd love to showcase what you can do. Would you fancy kind of taking part in this channel and getting 2 to 3 faces for the channel ideally? And then, yeah, getting started trying to commit to productions. That's in short how we'd get started. But really, like anything, any marketing channels, about starting with the research and the strategy. As tedious and as boring as that sounds, but I'm sure nowadays, especially in your domain, you can leverage AI heavily to do a lot of that. So it can be done a lot quicker than it used to be.
Yeah, I would just echo Ed's point there. I think a lot of people just dive into it thinking that they can make some screen recordings or upload things to YouTube of that nature, and it doesn't necessarily work out in favor for them. But I think as long as you nail your sort of strategy and positioning and kind of the purpose of why you're on YouTube in the first place and how that integrates into your wider marketing mix, for example, your blog or paid performance or LinkedIn, I think that stands you in good stead. And it is, we always pitch it as a bit of a slow burn, bit of a longer burn. But I don't know any company that started a YouTube channel 7 or 8 years ago that really regrets it now. And I think it's just putting in the reps, getting started, and then getting good as you progress and accumulate more data.
I think the other thing that we see very quickly with clients is they go from, we don't have much content, to we have so much content, not only for YouTube, but obviously if we're doing shorts, then publishing that as reels, potentially using it on LinkedIn, depending obviously on the kind of company. And then being able to repurpose, reuse things like the YouTube scripts for articles. And it just becomes, it's if you let it and if you give it some momentum, it can, like I said, change the DNA of the company a little bit, that you go from potentially quite focused on the paid channels, like a lot of startups are, that they invest a huge proportion of the budget in Meta, primarily in Google, or rather Google Ads, to starting to build out that organic side. And then it's a question, whether they commit to that or whether they too addicted to the very measurable or more measurable results and to the very quick turnarounds in terms of scaling. So yeah, and ideally you obviously want both of those things happening in parallel. But I think there are very few companies that really achieve that and manage to give both paid and organic the attention that they deserve.
That's the long-term goal. I wanted to ask you guys one last thing before I let you go, because I'm conscious we're running out of time. I wanted to ask you a very personal question, which is, if you had to pick 2 or 3 YouTube channels each that you think are really inspirational, that you think are a really good example, not obviously we covered a few earlier, what would they be? What would you suggest people to check out to be inspired, whether they're creator accounts, company accounts? Up to you.
I'm frantically trying to open my subscriber tab here so I can actually get some names. Ed, do you want me to go first, or? I think in terms of creator accounts, I think also link nicely to business. The one that stands out for me is a creator called Anna Hickman, and she's very much in the B2C space, but she's a web designer who really seamlessly integrates her lead magnets into her video content. And that's a creator that we always reference now in terms of, she's got a fairly modest audience, 40,000 subscribers. I say modest, that's actually really good. But all her videos are about web design for beginners, but then she positions her own templates and her own lead magnets and her own courses as the solution. But she really seamlessly integrates them into the video content and the scripting. So you don't really feel like you're being sold to, but the lead magnet or her product is the natural next step. And she also has this thing where she promotes the implementation, not the knowledge. So she gives everything away for free on the platform, and then the implementation, so the templates and the prompts or whatever, are the thing that she then sells to you eventually. But Anna Hickman would be one for me. Yeah.
Difficult to whittle it down, but I made a few quick notes. So one of them from the company side would be Nothing, definitely, because I think they were really smart with the original strategy, and it's a great example of. So just to very quickly touch on the original strategy, basically they piggybacked the popularity of Apple and iPhones and iPhone releases, and they got their CEO to basically review the iPhone with all his knowledge of supply chains and all those kinds of things. So the kind of insights that you don't get from creators of how these things are really put together and how much every single little bit costs and why it might be difficult to import and all these kinds of things. Yeah, and that obviously blew up and became super successful, but then they managed to get that consistency and managed to explore different formats and bring in influencers and all sorts. And it's just a super cool channel of something that you can use as how would our channel look in 5 years' time if it were to develop like this, that kind of thing. The other one is Berlin-based Honeypot, which has now become Cult Repo. YouTube was one of their biggest channels from almost day one. But where most people zigged, they zagged, and they produced these beautiful documentaries about the origins of different coding languages, to the point where they were then commissioned to go and produce documentaries about these coding languages. And now that's become Cult Repo, which I think that's the primary business, essentially. So where YouTube basically becomes the product, and it becomes a media company, having developed this media company in order to promote the product. And that just follows my ideology that you treat it like a product, basically, because it can be a revenue generating entity in its own right, whether that's from AdSense or sponsorships or whatever it might be. So that's a super cool reference. And then the other one of the ones that got me just interested in YouTube in the beginning is Zay Frank, who's a bit of a kind of original YouTuber. And he started just doing talking head videos, just typical YouTube kind of frantic cuts, super interesting topics, and then pivoted very randomly into doing kind of tongue-in-cheek wildlife documentaries. And just it's not something you'd ever see on broadcast TV or something. Very much YouTube and very much built for YouTube, but just a great example of how YouTube was, and then like a lot of that still continues to this day. But still, watching those back is really entertaining. That was one of the first channels I ever religiously followed.
I love it. Minor athletic interest and huge if true. I won't be able to give the full explanation, but you probably have seen them already. I'm conscious that we've gone way over time, but guys, it's been a pleasure. I could talk to you guys for hours about this topic. Thank you so much for being here with us. And yeah, really looking forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you
very
both.
much.
Ciao, guys.
Thanks a lot.
If you have a guest in mind that you think we should be interviewing, please reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know. If you have a topic you think we should be doing an episode about, please reach out on LinkedIn and let me know.